So I'll get the message out first since I only have 8 minutes. So what I'm trying to tell you is in the age of computer science and AI, we still can learn a lot from animals that can change our life. So I'm interested in study hibernation and how we learn from hibernators. So if you go to a sci-fi movie, you will notice that hibernation is almost an inevitable theme. I don't know if it's age proper for you guys. Even in SpongeBob, there's an episode of a hibernation. So it looks like almost it's beyond imagination. But in fact, I think hibernation is closer to you than you had imagined. And NASA actually is considering making devices so that astronauts can be turned into a hibernating or what's called torpor condition so that they can be sent to the Mars. And they organized recently a workshop called Space Torpor. So if we look at the animal kingdom, these are mammals, orders of mammals, you will notice that actually many of them do hibernate or enter a torpor state, a lighter form of hibernation. And it was once thought it's only for small mammals like ground squirrel and chipmunks, but in fact people find big mammals, bigger than we are, bears, they hibernate in the wintertime. And also it was not quite sure whether we human, as part of an order of primates, including humans, monkeys, gorilla and all that, whether they can hibernate. Recent findings showing that in Africa, surprisingly, Madagascar, limah can hibernate in the dry season when they don't have a lot of food. This is a species called fat-tailed dwarf limah. It's a name coming from the fact that before they're hibernating, their tail become really, really fat. And these are the energy source that they use during the course of hibernating season. Now, in the other side of Madagascar, there are lemurs that indeed bury them on the ground, and their body temperature would drop to below 20 Celsius. So they're true hibernators. So primates do hibernate. Now, of course, ultimately whether a human can hibernate is still in question. And there are anecdotal stories. For instance, this Japanese gentleman went on a hiking trail and got lost. And when he was found, according to the news, 24 days later, his body temperature is 22 Celsius. But he survived and recovered. And there's this also Swedish motorists that drive in a condition which I can see happening here as well. So be careful. But 2 months later, he was found in this car, and his body temperature is also very low, but apparently he survived as well. Well, you could argue these are just stories, and we couldn't verify whether they're truths or not, but here is a bona fide science paper, a scientific paper published in the premier medical journal, The Lancet, reporting a case of a Swedish radiologist who, in a ski trip, fell into very cold water and got stuck there, and her friends couldn't pull her out. And when she was rescued, her body temperature was below 15 Celsius, and she was considered clinically dead. But again, she recovered from this incident. So really give hope to the possibility of human hibernation. So the animal that we use for our study is called 13-line ground squirrel. They will, in the wintertime, bury themselves on the ground for almost half a year without eating and drinking. And so why were we interested in study that? So consider this scenario. I don't know if you're interested in the TV show of Game of Thrones. There's Jon Snow and got stabbed and left in the cold to die. So in this condition, the body temperature is going to drop, and he will suffer from cold-induced tissue damage. Also, he's bleeding, so the blood level is going to drop, and he will not have enough circulation, and that will cause injury. And even if he got rescued, reperfusion caused another level of injury. Even he survived all those miraculously. His muscle and bone is going to has dystrophy because of not being used. Now, consider our animals, ground squirrel. Their body temperature drops to below 4 or 5 Celsius for a prolonged period of time. And under those conditions, they do not have any cold-induced tissue or organ damage. Looking at this little cycles where they bring their body temperature back for just a short period of time. And this happens many times, but they don't have any ischemic or reperfusion-induced damage. And again, for a long period of time of not using their muscle and bones, they don't have any of the muscle or bone damage. And they wake up from hibernation and just run away. So that's why we wanted to understand how they do that, and that will help us. In the case of, for instance, I mentioned the critical care, emergency care manage, stroke, heart attack. In case of organ donation or transplantation, we store the organ in a condition very similar to hibernation. And even in neurodegenerative conditions, it has been shown that the cold treatment could be beneficial. So overall, we need a balance of energy supply and energy need. So in many of these medical disease conditions, we don't have a lot of oxygen and nutrients, and we need ways to quickly turn down our energy needs to keep the balance, to keep us healthy and survive. So when I earlier talked about hibernation and space travel, so NASA is set to send astronauts to Mars in 2030, and that's a long journey of more than half a year. So a lot of questions, a lot of problems to be solved, including the cargo loads. If all the astronauts need to eat, and also not only we need to have taking in, we also have things coming out. All these contributes to the cargo loads. So if we can reduce that, that will be very beneficial. The other big problem is radiation in space travel. And turns out hibernator, when they're in hibernation, they're more resistant to radiation damage. And also think about the social cycle effect. If you have a small group of people cramped in a very limited space for a prolonged period of time, consider what will happen if it's not your best friend around. And also, of course, medical emergencies, you cannot do the surgery up there, so it will be beneficial to put them in the torpor conditions until their surgery is available. So how do we study those? There are many ways to do that. We chose to study at the cellular level how hibernators adapt to those conditions. So we developed this system so that we can study those in a dish, petri dish. So we took cells from a hibernator, ground squirrels, and we reprogrammed them into stem cells. Simply put, it's like a reprogramming me back into you. I'm a scientist. I cannot be an astronaut, but you guys can be anything. So this is the way of reprogram the cell back to the capability of turning into any type of cell. So then we can turn them into heart cells. As you can see, hopefully beating of cells in a dish. These are our heart cells in a dish. And we can turn them into my favorite cell, neurons in the brain. And then we can, in a dish, modeling how hibernators survive different conditions. So in a recent study, we show that by comparing the human cell, which from non-hibernator, and the ground squirrel cell, we know knowledge of how ground squirrel cells survive at the very extreme conditions. And this knowledge helps us to protect neural tissue and kidney under very cold conditions. So I will end with my favorite sci-fi book. Again, hibernation is a big theme in the book, called The Three-Body Problem. I highly recommend this one. And the author of the book has just recently in Washington, D.C., received the prestigious Arthur Clarke Awards. And the awards for unleashing imagination. So I would hope that I can inspire you to unleash your imagination and do amazing things in the future and to change the life. Thank you very much.